My name is Stephen Feuerstein, developer advocate for Oracle Database with a focus on PLSQL, as you might know. After I've been doing this since 1991, pretty much full-time, exclusively focusing on PLSQL, and it never gets old. It never gets tired. It's just too darn exciting. And as part of our ongoing PLSQL Office Hours series, I'm very happy to introduce Robert Pastijn, product manager at Oracle Corporation. He's been around Oracle for a long time. He'll tell you more about his experience. And he's been focusing on building PLSQL-based APIs to manage his OCI Oracle Cloud Infrastructure services. So I thought that would be an interesting topic for us to explore on Office Hours. And Robert said,
why not?
Sure, why not? So we've got an hour to focus on this topic. Robert, you don't have to fill the whole hour. I haven't talked to you about this yet, but if you only get through half an hour and we've covered the material, that's fine. We have Q&A and we have chat. Please ask any questions in the Q&A and I will pick them up and either answer them or ask Robert about them at the appropriate time. And the chat will be fine for just passing on messages if you can't hear or you have any sorts of issues, things like that. But please keep the questions in the Q&A so everybody can see them in a more orderly fashion. So with that, let's turn it over to Robert and learn about using PLSQL to manage Oracle Cloud Services. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So, yeah, it was an interesting question. Like, can you put your experience to paper? And I said, yeah, why not? I mean, it's I want to show people how it works. So, my name is Robert Pastijn. Really depends on which country you are, what my last name is pronounced. But I am one of the product managers inside the Oracle Database product development team. I not really manage a product. I just try to advocate, basically just like Stephen, as much as possible of the Oracle Database to the outside world. And one of the things we had while we were trying to promote the Oracle Database in this situation on the Oracle Cloud is on how to actually manage those databases for creating or deletion or just basically cleanup inside OCI Classic, which used to be Oracle Public Cloud, and lately, of course, in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure in OCI. So this is me in the good old days when I was still working inside an office, playing around with an Exadata system. Anyway, really, really fun. It's still there, but I need to clean it up soon because it's an old one. Anyway, so this whole story started in the beginning where we had Oracle Public Infrastructure, or Oracle Public Cloud. That was the official name in the beginning. Oracle Cloud. Oracle was not the first one to join the whole cloud business. And in the beginning, they only had Oracle Database Cloud. So I couldn't really understand why we only had Database Cloud and not Infrastructure Cloud. But in the beginning, we had Oracle Database Cloud. And we were tasked to actually promote the Database Cloud to our partners and customers. So for that, we received 63 or 64 different domains for our team to maintain. And it was like a hot potato. It was thrown around between people like, oh, you get it, you get it. And it was hot, 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 because the big problem was it's not the actual usage of the domains. I mean, that worked pretty well. But for example, a database took about an hour and a half to actually start up, to provision and start up. So for our trainings, we didn't want to waste an hour and a half to create an environment and a database. So we wanted to pre-create databases for our attendees inside the cloud. And of course, afterwards, you had to clean them up because, well, next day somebody else might need the environment and you had to set it up. In the beginning, we actually did this using scripts. So Python was one of the scripts that was one of the languages that was there to set up things. The only downside is it wasn't something you can just start up and walk away from. It wasn't how do you say that? An online thingy. You had to wait. And not always did the database actually create successfully. So sometimes you were there for, well, in this example, like 54 minutes, and then the system said, oh, something went wrong. That's right, hence the characters on the right, which is not Chinese, but Korean, pronounced as Moya, which means what? Which basically means that after 54 minutes, you had to start all over again. Which is not a problem if you work from home, but we usually deliver these workshops on-premise at customer sites and at partner sites, Oracle sites. So there was a plane to catch, and I didn't want to sit around with 10, 15 of these environments. I got 15 putty screens on my setup. And if one of them failed, it basically meant that I was 1 hour later at the airport or 1 hour later in the restaurant where we had dinner in the evening. So I was so fed up with that. That's the moment where I started to look into using REST APIs, and can I actually kick off something using PLSQL with Apex? Well, first, for those people that don't know, what's a REST API? It wasn't invented until 2000, where somebody, a guy called Roy Fielding, actually put it in its PhD assertion. And it's basically an HTTP call that you do, mostly get, put, post, and delete. So get is for getting stuff, put is for creation stuff, post is for updating, and delete hopefully speaks for itself. There's a full list of it. But you send something to a remote system, and then the remote system gives you hopefully an answer saying it's good. So either XML, HTTP, and JSON. And JSON was the popular way in the Oracle Cloud to actually communicate. So I picked up JSON at that moment. So to access the Oracle Public Cloud through REST calls from a database was actually never described anywhere in the documentation. Still, until today, nothing in the OCI documentation actually lists anything on PLSQL. So they did it with a curl, with a bash script, or Python, or how to do it in Java. But I wanted to do it from PLSQL. And you can say I'm very proud to be a database guy, but I don't speak Java and Python. It's that simple. And your curl is okay. So initially we started with UTL HTTP requests, and then I found out very quickly that Apex 4.2 had a very, very, very nice procedure, or actually function, that was the Apex web service. And one of them was actually the make REST request. The only thing you had to do is just push the URL, the HTTP method, like a get, put, post, whatever you want to do. If needed, use and password, any proxy overrides, and all of these things that you could put in. And then Apex would actually, the Apex code, so not really the Apex application, but the PLSQL code inside the database that belonged to Apex, we could actually leverage that just from the command prompt. And that was actually quite good. So as an example, I found a very nice, for today's presentation, I found a very nice REST endpoint or a REST enabled service of a service that actually creates jokes or has a very long list of jokes. So as an example, you can actually say select, well, make the REST request, send it to this sv443.net/joke API. And I ask for some jokes in the programming area. It's a get, I want to retrieve something, and I send it off. And I get an output. It basically says blah, blah, JSON, blah, blah, blah. And then how do you tell HTML from HTML5? Well, just try it on Internet Explorer. If it works, no, it's HTML5. So it's funny. But we're not interested in just one line. We're interested in a lot of information. So at the same time, well, I can retrieve that information from that particular JSON struct. We've got a very nice PLSQL command, I think since Oracle 10 already, that is JSON value. And I can actually say, I want to have the value joke from this large batch of JSON. And then it shows you very nicely the joke and only the JSON output. But like I said, usually we're not working just with one line, we're working with a lot of lines. So in this case, same REST request, but in this case, I'm asking for 10 jokes. And then the output is not so readable anymore. So it's very difficult to get the information out of the REST API. And I was faced with that. So I had something like, okay, I want to have something with category, and I want to do with a type, and I want to have the actual joke. But it's just too much work to get all of that out with just this JSON value thingy. Well, I tried once. It's an after day of programming. I had something running, but not really good. And then I discovered something called JSON Table.
Ah, yes.
JSON Table is also a function inside PLSQL. And it basically means that you put in the large JSON, which could be, well, the REST API that it just put in, but the output is a large JSON. I tell it there are several jokes available, and please extract for me the category, the type, and the joke. And as a result, you get something that really looks like a relational table on your screen, just from your SQL prompt, without any strange things. So, well, I like the top one, like a SQL statement walks into a bar and sees two tables. It approaches and asks, may I join you? I mean, funny.
Can't beat that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, I do like the generation of random numbers is too important to be left to chance. And what was another one? Debugging is like finding needles in a haystack, is searching for needles in a haystack. I like that one as well. But then if you're ever into something like this, go to this REST API, challenge it, and be amazed of how many jokes there are out there on various subjects. A little bit more serious is, of course, the OCI Classic or the Oracle Public Cloud. When I asked it, how many databases do you have running in this system? And then you get a barf of information. And I just put it here on the screen. For humans, it's almost impossible to read, let alone if you have 60 of those domains all spitting out pages and pages and pages of JSON. It's really not nice. So the thing I do is I go in and I look at the values that I'm interested in. So in this case, I've got the service name, I've got the status, the creation time, the legacy. I could have pulled out anything, but I just took these columns out. And doing exactly the same thing, instead of putting the actual REST call inside a SQL statement, which could be done, but makes it really unreadable, I decided to put the actual REST call inside a function. And in the Oracle Public Cloud, you also need to identify yourself, and you have to give some additional header information like XID tenant name and all of this stuff. I mean, you had to do some things. So what you do basically is you create a function, and the output is the large barf of JSON. And what I thought would work is very simple. Say select star from JSON table, the function, and then whatever you have left behind, just like the joke API. Well, this sometimes works, and it really depends on your database level, and it really depends on your patch level, because some databases will say no problem and give you an output, and some database versions will actually say no output, just say, well, no data found, which is really frustrating. So I rewrote it a little bit by selecting first this function from Dual, and I really had to laugh out loud when I first saw this and noticed that it worked. And then the output of the select from Dual can then be used inside the JSON table. Really, really strange, but this works. And if you run it this way, you actually get something that is like a relational table. You can query it, you can do where clauses, you can do a group by, you can do having anything you're used to in a select statement can actually be done using the REST API calls on a system. And of course, the moment you have it, you can also import this into Apex. So you can really say as a table source, as a reporting source, I want to have this statement. Either you create a view around it and then you put it in, and then you can query it. And nobody will know that this is actually coming somewhere from a REST API call, somewhere in the background, instead of outside the database. Of course, it takes a couple of seconds before the answer is actually there, but well, you can create a materialized view out of it. That's actually what I did in the end. And actually something additional nice, if you create a view on top of this one, you can, for example, also do an onUpdate trigger, or you can do an onDelete trigger. So in theory, somebody could actually here in this system say, delete one of these lines. And then in the onDelete trigger, you can create a REST API call to actually delete that instance from the service underneath. So you are very, very flexible if you do this with the combination of PLSQL, views, and any tool that's able to connect to it can actually work with that. So I was really happy, and this worked for a long time. I even made it a lot more flexible with a join. Like I can select my function from Dual, but of course I can also select it from another table. And for every row in that table, the function will be executed. So I hope you remember that I had more than 60 domains that I needed to maintain. So I just uploaded those 60 domains into a table, my tenancies, put the username, passwords in there that I actually needed, and used that as the first query that I joined with the JSON table. And this actually works like a charm. It's not fast, I have to be very honest. Sometimes it takes like 5 or 10 minutes before the first answers are coming back. But like I said, I put a materialized view on it. I schedule it so that it's refreshed every night at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And when I get in the morning at 9 o'clock, everything is refreshed, and I select from materialized view, and it works like a charm. So just as an example how very, very flexible PLSQL is, especially if you leverage the Apex code that's underneath. You don't even have to use Apex, but it supplies you with so many very nice things. Downside of using the OCI Classic REST APIs, in case you ever want to play with it, the request uses username and password. You have to hard code that, or something called an authentication cookie. Both of them are not really secure and not really nice. So the username and password is hard coded, so somebody can steal it, which is not really nice. And the authentication cookie would be valid for half an hour or an hour. So if somebody would steal your authentication cookie, then in theory they could execute whatever they wanted to in the next hour or 3 hours or 2 hours, whatever you want to have. And another thing I found out is that the authentication type was different for the different API calls. So a database call was different to a infrastructure as a service call, was different to an object storage call, and it even depended on which zone you were in. So if you're in the Europe zone, or you were in the US North or the US East zone, everything was different. I really had to keep track of a large table with all the different ways to actually access the OCI Classic. But fortunately, OCI Classic is now very slowly being moved into the generation 2 in Oracle OCI. So that basically meant I had to go back to the drawing board and I had to start thinking about how will I do this in OCI. Because if you start offering something to your team members and take a lot of the work out of their hands, they really expect you to do exactly the same thing if the new version of the new stuff comes up. So OCI. The good thing, in my opinion, I'm not an OCI person, but I think that OCI is completely built around REST APIs. Everything you do in the console, every click you do in the screen is, I think, eventually translated into REST APIs, which means that I would say almost or even more functionality of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure is available through REST APIs. That's a good thing. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. The first time I looked at this, the authentication is different. I thought, what's authentication? It's username and password usually, and I'll find a way around it. So in the Oracle documentation, there is a link to a draft document of the IETF organization, which basically, well, it's a big document. So if you have time to spare, please download it and look at it. But in a summary, it basically means you have to generate a public-private PEM key combination, which is different from the one you do for RSA if you want to log into a Linux system. It's got a different structure. You have to register your public key with the Oracle OCI, and then very simply, you sign any request you have using your private key before you send it into the OCI. And then the OCI will validate it. And the only thing I thought was really difficult is that the signing included a date timestamp, and your date timestamp on your server should not be have more than 5 minutes skew between the date timestamp they have on the server. So I thought that was my only problem, but it wasn't. Because Oracle, by default, in the DBMS crypto or any other packages, do not supply anything for signing. You can do hashing, you can do encryption, you can decryption, of course, you can do all kinds of things with it, but it doesn't include the signing. So there's the Korean again. Moya, what? Looking at the documentation, same. I had a deja vu Groundhog Day that there are signing examples available for a lot of languages, but not for PLSQL. Of course not. I mean, and especially not in the beginning. When I started to do this, there were only like 4 examples. Now we have 8. But it was there, and I was determined I wanted this for PLSQL, because in reality I don't speak Java, so I mean it's that simple. So Oracle PLSQL by default cannot sign using a PEM key, so there are no DBMS crypto options available on the system, but apparently it works in Java because there's a couple of examples. I can do Java in the database, that's good, but I don't really speak Java. That's a problem, but I can Google, and Google was really my friend in this case. And after a lot of trying and failing, I got it to work. I wrote my first Java source code in the database, which was only this. So it's very, very simple. So this public class SHA256 RSA, this basically gets a string, gets 2 strings. The string it needs to sign. It gets the private PEM key from somewhere, and then it combines them with something that's default available inside Java security packages, and also by default available in Oracle databases since 11.2. So you have to have an 11.2 database and up to do this. And then I can actually create a PLSQL Java pointer, if you want to do it, where I just put the string in, I put the primary key in, and then I get the signing string back. So it's only this little tiny piece of code that was between me and actually doing this inside OCI. And it needs a lot of help, because what do you actually need to sign? That was a problem as well. So for this, I actually went to the Bash example, to the curl example. Unfortunately, I speak a little bit of Bash, so that's good. I bash people, so I speak a little bit of Bash. And I just took out all these little steps, like, oh, it needs to have something called xcontent SHA with a size. And I was able to translate everything into, well, first a timestamp string. I mean, what does it look like? What is a signature string? I found out that I need to get all the spaces out. I need to get all the character 10s out and all of these things. And then I could sign it and I could put in the header. And actually, it worked, to my big surprise. That was really nice.
Fantastic.
So I created a package. Yeah, I created a package. This LLs for LiveLabs. We'll come back to that later on. Package execute, and I could do a get, a put post, which is basically the same thing. And I could do a delete. So now, oh, I think my Google Home is doing something bad. Yeah, also automation is always nice. So I could now do exactly the same thing as I did before on OCI Classic. I could now do on OCI as well, because once you got this to work, you got the actual get, put, post, and delete to work, then it's really, really nice. So here comes the complex statements again, just like you saw. This is an example that I use to list all the autonomous databases I have in OCI, where I just select the region and the name, which comes from a table, and then I do this get again, basically exactly the same thing as you do in OCI Classic. You get a large chunk of JSON out, and then at the bottom you see the JSON table again, where I just extract the ID, compartment ID, display name, DB name, and all of these things that are interesting for it. This is pretty fast until you start querying multiple tenancies, where you actually say, I've got 20 tenancies now enabled, or 23 tenancies, and every tenancy takes like a couple of seconds. So this statement can actually take about 5 minutes before it sends an answer back, because it needs to do this REST API calls to all of these statements. So that's one of the things. Another thing I try to do is join 2 of those JSON tables. So I did a REST API call to get all the compartments with a REST API call, which is one REST API call, because all compartments are the same in all regions. So I just went to one region, asked for the compartments, it got me a list, and I tried to join that with the autonomous databases of all compartments in all regions. After 4 or 5 hours, I decided to stop and break the query. So I've learned from that is that if you need to join something, just put the information in a table or materialized view, as I have it here. So I've got the compartments, materialized view, and that's something you can join with one statement, one REST API statement on a system. And that works, and that really works. So, and I rolled this out internally inside our organization for a while, and there was a lovely lady called Kay Malcolm inside Oracle, and we had been working for a while. And she said, well, Robert, can't you do the stuff that you do? Can we do that for outside parties as well? Can we do that for customers or partners, or even for colleagues that need something to be set up? And we said, yeah, sure, why not? So this is what I'm working on right now. This is what triggered Stephen as well, is a product called LiveLabs. It's out there already, not with an official Oracle URL, but we're working on that. And LiveLabs is basically all around giving hands-on guides and step-by-step guides to the people. It already is in our GitHub environment, so it was not that we are reinventing the wheel. But the nice thing is that, so these are a couple of workshops. I think we now have triple-digit workshops. We're going for 4 digits, so over 1,000 workshops inside the environment. You can select what you want to do. And basically, there are, well, we've got 4 different ways to run a certain workshop. The first 2 will run on your own trial, but, and this is why I put this in, this is not a commercial for LiveLabs. This is basically the option, one of the options. Not all workshops have this, but the multi-tenant fundamentals workshop, for example, you can actually say, run this on LiveLabs. And what it will do in the background, it will create a compartment for you. It will create a username. It will create a group. It will put you into the group. It will give you access rights if needed. Like in this case, we will pre-create the multi-tenant database instance for you, and all that in a completely automated way. So in the background, you see that for this particular workshop, for example, there's a lot of steps that need to be done. So I hope you can see it a little bit. You can create a compartment, a user, a group. You put the user in the group. You add a password to the user. Create a policy, a virtual network, a subnet, internet gateway, security list, route. All of these steps are single REST API calls. So what I simply do is I break apart every environment that we need to set up, and I break it apart in individual steps, and those individual steps are executed by an automated task on the system, and the answer is basically sent back. So in this case, you create a compartment. Well, this is the object ID, the OCI ID of that compartment. There's a user, OCI ID of that particular compartment. And with that, of course, together with the email, we are creating something for you. And in the end, we have created stuff for you. We can create and we can build an environment for the end user. And not only the building, because usually the building is quite the easy part, but we can also tear it apart. We can also tear it down. So for this workshop, you've got an hour to play. And after an hour, you get 1 or 2 warnings. And then automatically in the background, everything is deleted again. Your access is revoked and everything. So with this, we can simply, by leveraging the REST APIs through PLSQL, this is all done from Apex, by the way. There's not a single piece of code on operating systems running. It's all Apex, and it's very flexible and it's very easy to use. So, summary, downside of OCI REST API, it's the signing. The signing will, well, I wouldn't say kill you, but it's difficult to get it to work. There are very good things in the signing though, and that's the reason why I was a little bit against it in the beginning, but now I see the good things because, well, there's less traffic per REST request. So cookie-wise, usually you had to send something, wait for the cookie to come back, which sometimes you had to do it 3 times before the cookie came back, and then you had to actually execute something. So with this, you only sign it once, you send it, and that's that. There are less options for the man-in-the-middle attack because everything you do is signed with your personal private key. And people really have to steal your private key before they can actually do something. There are no username passwords in the scripts or on the network or in transit or whatever. And all REST APIs work the same. I think that's a very good thing of the OCI team. They have a mandate that everything should work the same. And that's really nice. So my question was, why doesn't Oracle provide something like this? I mean, if it took me like weeks to sort it out, why isn't Oracle just delivering this? And the good thing is we do. We are working on it. Yeah, there's a package called DBMS Cloud that was developed for Autonomous Database in the beginning. Initially, it was for getting files in and out the Autonomous Database, like for import, export, or data pump. But they extended it into DBMS Cloud send request. And send request basically means that you are sending something to the outside world, which could be, in theory, everything. So also Amazon or my Joke API, for example. But one of the options is actually to do it for OCI as well. And it will handle all the signing and it will handle all the steps that are needed on the system. So at this moment, the DBMS Cloud is available for the Oracle Autonomous Database. So even if you do a free tier database, you can leverage this. And it's planned for the next release for all OCI databases which are running in the Oracle OCI Cloud. And it's on the roadmap for future on-premise databases. So there is hope in the on the horizon. Nice. Yeah, steps to do, basically the same thing, but a lot more secure than I'm doing it right now, because I, for example, have to store my private key file somewhere in a table that in theory people could see. Of course, I've got DBMS crypto and redaction on it, and I secured it very well. But in the DBMS Cloud, it's much nicer because you first have to create a credential without spilling your, well, that's the only time where you have to put in your private key. But you just put a name to that private key and all the stuff you need. And from that moment on, the only thing you need to do is use that credential name here, which can be any word that you like with any name. And then you can just do a send request, the URL, and the get. I mean, I use the internal ones here. And that's exactly the same thing that you can do with my rudimentary version of this PL/SQL stuff. But it works like a charm. I mean, it really works. So if people want to play around with OCI and REST APIs and things like that, just go to the Oracle Autonomous Cloud, get a free tier environment, and then you can play around with it. So the free services for those people, I hope that everybody's heard about it because Oracle is very public about it, is that you can have free services amongst which the 2 autonomous database instances. And yes, those autonomous database instances also have the DBMS Cloud package, and you can play around with it. So it's really fun to do. So summary, I think I have a lot of fun with PL/SQL in general and OCI REST APIs as well. It's only going forward from now on, and like I said, with this LiveLabs thing, it's really, really fun to play with. If you want to play with the DBMS Cloud for free, you can go to the Oracle Cloud free offer. I've got a GitHub environment where I've sampled some examples for DBMS Cloud. One is, for example, well, the OCI calling is one. Another one is, for example, you can send an SMS from Autonomous Database just by calling a REST API of a message provider. I've got that one. But also the other way around, REST API in general, you can very easily open up your Autonomous Database to be a REST API provider. One of the things I built, and I've got in these examples online, is that if you have an iPhone, you can simply say, hey Siri, create me a database. And then underneath is a REST API call that just executes the OCI steps needed to create a new autonomous database. It's a hit on demos and presentations. And another thing I've written is an ICS, a calendaring thingy. So like I said, I'm managing all these workshops and these environments for our team members. And just to remind them that they have a reservation, I actually generate from the database a .ical file or .ics file that people can import into their Google Calendar or into their Apple iPhone. And then you can see on your calendar what time your environment starts, what the status is of that environment, and all of these things. It's all there in the examples thing. It's on GitHub, so no, you can play with it. Signing request, put it in. How to use an Oracle Autonomous Database, just put it in as well. And yes, I also put the Java signing code that I developed. It's not in a nice GitHub.io page, but it's in my base GitHub thingy repository that you can play with.
And I'll put all these links up on the Ask Tom Office Hours page, so you can just come back to that same page that you came to join the session. You'll see all those links, including this link to this video and the slide deck.
Yeah, so let's look at the question. Let's see, DBMS Cloud is going to take care of API signing. Yes, so that's the good thing. So you first create credentials. That's the only place where you have to give your private PEM key to the Oracle database. It will store it completely hash scrambled and not retrievable in any way. And from that moment on, you can just say, DBMS Cloud, I want to go to the OCI REST API. These are my credentials, and that's the only thing you need to do.
That's going to become a very popular built-in package.
I think so, yeah, I hope so, because yeah, we had some problems with it in 18C. That's all solved now. 19 had already been working. Let me see. So quizzes, very glad. I think that's it. Share the recording on my email. I'm busy with my work. Okay.
That's right. I already covered those. So that was the one question. Sorry. Do we have other questions around using PL/SQL to build cloud APIs, or other cloud questions you've got? Robert has a lot of experience, obviously, with these services, or about PL/SQL.
Yeah. Or questions on, can you show us this next time? I mean, for either Stephen or myself. It's also there as well. If not, then I think I've got a good half an hour.
Actually, if you don't mind, go back to that first slide showing you sitting in front of the machinery, the racks. And if you wouldn't mind, share the story behind that. I'm sure people would be interested in hearing.
Okay, I'm going back, going up. Yeah, so got a lot of slides, too many. Here it is. Yeah, here it is. I'll share this one. So this picture is actually taken officially I'm not allowed to show this, but I know that the room will be gone anyway in a couple of weeks. So this is the data center inside the Netherlands. It's my location of where I live, and not where I work, because I work all around the world. And at a certain moment in time, we had to deliver a lot of trainings on Exadata. So there was an offer from the US Exadata team. They said, well, we can actually use this to push it out into the other side. We have a spare Exadata. Do you want it? Well, if somebody offers that to you, you always say yes. So one morning I got a phone call saying, well, there's a giant truck here to actually ship something, and out came a full 19-inch rack with all the elements of an Exadata system in there. So very proudly, I took it into the data center, only to hear from the data center owner, are you crazy? We're not going to host any foreign racks into the data center.
Foreign racks, even though they came from Oracle headquarters.
Even though, yeah, but as you can see, these were actually bolted to the floor, and these were actually on the floor, complete with cooling slides and everything. So they said, well, there's just no space to host another 19-inch rack. So the only thing I could do at that moment is just literally tear the whole Exadata system apart and rebuild it into the existing 19-inch racks that were available. And while doing that, it took me like 3 days to actually do that, and I still have pain in my back and to do that, because you have to put all the cables correct, and it's interesting. One of my colleagues, Kevin Lee, actually came around very surprisingly and shot this picture, and he sent it to me, and I think I've used it ever since as to show my love, not only for the Oracle database, but also for the hardware where stuff is running on, so including in the cloud. So that's the reason why I came to both hardware operating system and PLSQL.
Thanks for sharing that story. And why don't you go ahead and unshare so we can see you front and center, and we've got a few more questions. So
okay, so
how is OCI integrated with this Plus application?
Well, OCI is usually not integrated with anything. It's a standalone service. But from C++, you can do the same REST API calls that I just did from PLSQL. The REST API options are available in the documentation. If you just type in OCI REST API Oracle, enter, you get a whole list of REST API calls. And if you go to the OCI manual, I think I shared the links in my presentation, you also see examples for, I think, C++ as well, to actually execute those things. So you kick something off in the internet, you get an answer back in JSON, and whatever you do with it, it's your choice. And
couldn't you from C++ also execute the PLSQL APIs? In other words, all the intelligence is built into those APIs, you just call them.
In theory, yeah. I mean, in theory, if you have your C++ application connected to an Oracle database, of course, if you create a procedure around it, you can kick off any procedures you want to, or get information from any view you want. So that was also for me. It's for me the REST API calls is data, and data should be in the database. So I would definitely, you're right, do this in the database and then kick it off, just like you would do a normal procedure or another normal query or a view or a table from your C++ application. But you can do both if you want to.
All right, here's the next. Why don't you use Terraform for LiveLabs instead of REST APIs?
Well, to kick off Terraform, you still need to call REST APIs, because there is no way from any language just to shout very loudly at OCI saying, now this is a Terraform and now please do it for me. So in the end, you have to use REST APIs anyway to kick something off from a database into the remote system. And yes, that could be a Terraform setup. Be it that in Terraform you can do a lot of steps, just exactly like I do in my LiveLabs setup. Like you need to do 25 steps, and you can do all of that inside Terraform. My big problem was that if something went wrong inside the Terraform script, I didn't have any option to very easily pinpoint where it went wrong and also how to restart it. So if I already created a user called Steven, and in the next step, the group creation, it goes wrong, I can't just restart the Terraform. I would have to clean it up completely and then start from scratch. And I really wanted to have every step restartable. So if Stephen gets created, the group foresting gives a problem, I want to be able to restart my procedure. It skips over the create user step and just retries to do the group creation again. And that's something I cannot do with Terraform, or I would have to create a Terraform for each individual step, which is a waste, I would say. But yes, you could do it with Terraform if the world was ideal and all the Terraform scripts would always work.
And here's a question about LiveLabs. I know this isn't an advertisement for LiveLabs, but first of all, how much does it cost to use LiveLabs?
Nothing. It's all free. Everything we offer is completely 100% for free. The only thing you need is an Oracle single sign-on, just anything you use for OTN, and you don't even need that. So if you just want to go to LiveLabs to follow a training, and you will run it on your own free tier, your own tenancy, your own free trial, you don't even have to log in. So we're not even capturing your details or anything. The only reason to log in is because we need to send you something, as in the reservation details and user and password and things. So the only thing we store is your username. Anything else, like IP address or whatever you do with the environment, basically is not logged by the LiveLab environment. Of course, there's security in the background from Oracle IT. If you start sending out spam messages, they will shut you down anyway. But it's not something that we will store or monitor or how do you say that, gather and data mine or something like that. So it's completely free to use. Yeah.
So I just wanted to, I knew that, but I just thought I'd emphasize it and point it out because it's one of many sites that are available from Oracle that give you tremendous amount of free resources. So the Oracle Ask Tom website, Oracle DevGym for quizzes, workouts, and classes, Live SQL for live execution of SQL, PLSQL, script library, and now we have Oracle LiveLabs where you can run these workshops on your own time, at your convenience, entirely free, and so much of it is so nicely automated.
Yeah,
using
and some
PLSQL.
Some of them actually point to other sites. Like if we have a lab that specifically is only about SQL statements, we're not going to build a whole environment for you. We simply say, well, this is the lab, go to Live SQL, type in this, and you can play and practice and do whatever you want to. So it's trying to combine everything we have on training, and my emphasis is all on free. I will never ever work with any party that wants to charge money for this. So this is just free.
Great, and we'll provide the bit.ly link to LiveLabs on the Ask Tom Office Hours page as well. And I think it's perhaps the last question from Roger. You mentioned DBMS Cloud and Autonomous Database in OCI, but isn't that available in all OCI DB services as it's native to the database?
Well, the DBMS Cloud is not native to the database because that would mean that it would be in on-premise environments as well. It is on the roadmap to be native to everything. There are DBMS Cloud packages in OCI database at the moment. So I'm not talking autonomous. Autonomous is fully functional, but there are DBMS Cloud packages inside the OCI database as a service, but they do not always contain the REST API part. So it will contain stuff to do a data pump, import and export, but it might not contain the REST API calls basically in the signing part. But like I said, it's on the roadmap, and I really hope that in a couple of months, everything, not sure on 21, I haven't heard anything about 21 yet, if it's available in there. I hope 21 or else in a patch set somewhere. So yeah.
And I'd just like to say, since he did mention a time frame of a couple of months, where we're hoping that's not a commitment on our part. Do not make any buying decisions based on any information provided by Robert on those timelines.
No. A couple of months is flexible. I mean, some depends on the country. I mean, if you go to the Nordics, it's probably a couple of months. If you go more south, it could be years. So it's depends on the region and availability. Yeah. The plans are there, but it just needs to be done.
And I think we have no more questions. We've had a number of people thanking you for a really great session and for congratulating you on all the hard work you've done. So we'll make all of this available online. Is there any chance of making some of the codes on your GitHub repo? Yeah. So
and the presentation, we can put the presentation somewhere as well, but we'll talk about it later on.
Yeah, for sure. All righty. Well, thanks for joining us, and thank you, Robert, for a great presentation. And,
You're welcome.
And hopefully you can all learn from his experience and accelerate your own use of Oracle Cloud Services and the automating of those services.
With PLSQL.
With PLSQL. Thank you. Yes, and we'll be back next month with another session exploring PLSQL. Our plan right now is to talk about using PLSQL APIs to do migrations, database migrations. So another example of leveraging the power of PLSQL to get your job done more easily. All right, thanks, Robert. Everybody take care, happy coding, stay safe, stay masked, wash your hands, social distancing, etc. And hopefully
live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper, and hopefully we'll see you in person when it's safe to do that again. Take care, everybody.
Exactly.
Bye.
Bye.